Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Do we have students in the house? If you're a student, just clap, let me hear you. I want to take a moment to celebrate all the work that has been done by students, by the young activists, by college-age students, faculty, and staff that have really brought about a tipping point in the United States. And the fact that you're being attacked, demonized, sometimes losing some of the jobs that are offered to you after graduation, sometimes you actually are put on probation and having to go through hearings. It is not because of failure, it is because of success in challenging the status quo and bringing Palestine to the center stage in the United States and across the country. Now, I want to speak to you about Palestine a little bit differently. We're here in the United States, and some would say that Columbus discovered America because he wanted to find an alternative route to India to find spices and possibly some wealth. And that part might be true to a level. But the reality is that Columbus' journey across the Atlantic was specifically to launch a new crusade. He wrote that in his diary, that after the failure of the crusades on the Eastern Front, Columbus came with the idea of having a crusade that will encircle the Muslim world by finding an alternative route to India, striking a deal and an alliance with the Khan, who was in Western China, helped convert many people to Christianity, and then help capture Jerusalem with the wealth and the gold that is acquired. He felt that he will usher in the second coming of Jesus. So as we are here in the western parts of the United States, or the western part of the hemisphere, Columbus' mission was directly connected to try to actually acquire Jerusalem through a crusade. In some notation, Columbus and later on the Portuguese said that if they don't achieve the conquest of Jerusalem, they might take Mecca and then exchange it with the Muslims for Jerusalem. Now this is have to change our orientation a little bit. When we speak about the conquest and the continued settlements of Palestine today, we have to look on a 500-year of colonization, of dispossession, of opening the road to colonization of India, colonization of Yemen, Sudan, Egypt, the opening of the Suez Canal, and then the British arriving in Palestine in 1917. All these are connected dots in the attempt to try to take over and dismantle Palestinian as well as Muslim and Arab presence in the region. History is written by those who have the ability to write and the victors. And if we look at how history is being written, it's been written by Orientalists, it's been written by colonialists, it's been written by racists, it's been written by Islamophobes, and today it's being written by anti-Palestinian racism, and we need to understand that. Now, how can we share the load? How can we share the load in relations to Palestine? Let me be very clear time and time again. Silence when it comes to Palestine is not a choice. Silence will not change history. Silence will not bring about transformation. History is made by people who speak truth to power. History is made by people who understand the connectivity of issues. If you understand what is taking place in Syria, you understand what is taking place in Palestine. If you understand what is taking place in Yemen and Sudan, you understand what is taking place in Palestine. If you understand Kashmir, if you understand the attack of Iraq, if you understand the attempt to dismantle the unity of Muslims, you need to also understand Palestine and its centrality. Palestine is not a passing place. Palestine have always been at the hub of global dynamics. It was not coincidental that the British wanted to create a buffer state in Palestine. Well, they had the Suez Canal. If you don't understand the Suez Canal, that's 14% of the global trade passing through the Suez Canal. It's the artery for Europe. It's the artery that moves natural gas and oil across the region into European needs. So when we speak about carrying the load, it is also carrying a deep understanding of the centrality of Palestine as a distinct legacy of colonization, crusading, as well as theological understandings. What do I mean by theological understandings? Evangelical Christianity have produced Jewish Zionism, and increasingly also we need to speak about Muslim Zionism, which means those individuals that attempt to adopt Islam to actually formulate the normalization of relations with Israel, with the centrality and Israel becoming the regional hegemon that protects them, but at the expense of the Palestinians. That is understanding that we have to actually have deeply ingrained in our mind in order to accurately describe what is taking place in Palestine. Now, second, it is important for us to be doubly active at this particular point of time. People are saying, well, Trump is coming to power, and they have passed H.R. 9495. We are scared of what might develop in the few days, weeks, and months ahead of time. Let me assure you that Trump and those who are behind Trump do not control history. God controls history. God is the ultimate decider of what happens and what's not. Now in the Quran we know God tells us, are you afraid of them? You should be afraid of God. We will say to Trump and anyone that comes with Trump that justice will prevail. Justice will prevail. Even though some injustice might have respite, but God gives respite but does not forget. We will say to Trump that Palestine will be free. Why? Because South Africa became free. And if you don't understand South Africa and don't relate it to Palestine, then you don't understand history. Now I know Trump is going to come immediately and is going to issue an executive order to annex area B and C in the West Bank. MashaAllah, what changed? The settlers have already taken most of the area B and C. When the Palestinians signed the Oslo Agreement, there was about 140,000 settlers in the West Bank. Today, during the peace process, we have 760,000 settlers. An increase in settlers does not end the justice of the cause. And an executive order does not change the reality that the Palestinians will return to Palestine. If it's not today, it's not tomorrow. If it's not tomorrow, the day after, we are going back to Palestine because that is what's just and that's what needs to happen. So rallying for the cause of justice today is as important as it has ever been in the history of Palestine. I said, that we have reached a tipping point, and we did. What do I mean by a tipping point? You remember what's her name? The president of Columbia University, when she walked up to Congress, Manoush Shafiq, and she thought that she gave a presentation to Congress, and she came back empowered. She basically got her jacket. She might be actually looked upon as a secretary of some department. She called on the police and going after the students. In 48 hours, there were 40 other universities that have encampments. And literally within a few weeks, about 138 different universities across the world started having encampments for Palestine. That's a tipping point. It's not controlled by Trump. It's not controlled by Biden. It's not controlled by Congress. A tipping point has occurred. If you see about cultural producers, and if you walked outside in the bazaar, you see cultural producers, you see the t-shirts, you see the outfits, you see the hats, you see music producers are including Palestine, Gaza, and their view of what is taking place in relations to Palestine. That is a tipping point that you need to understand what is happening. It's not in the hands of Trump. It's not in the hands of Biden. It's not in the hands of Congress. That change is taking place and a tipping point is upon us. We need to understand that. If you look at what is taking place in terms of books and what people are writing, what social media, it's overwhelming. Even in the initial study, we saw an overwhelming change because seeing is believing, and people are witnessing for the first time a genocide unfolding. You could actually legislate to shut people's mouths, but you cannot actually end the understanding that genocide is taking place, and those who are responsible for it will be taken to justice. If it's not today, it's tomorrow. And I will tell to Blinken, to Biden, and some of the Arab governments that have been complicit in the genocide, that a time will come that you will be taken into account for being complicit in what took place in Gaza. It is for the first time that we have a live-streamed genocide taking place in front of our eyes. And the State Department spokespeople, the White House, the Arab Muslim world, completely trying to sell us a different reality. You know, the statement says, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The pictures that are coming for Gaza cannot be covered by 1 billion words of hypocrites, complicit media and politicians that are trying to tell us that children are not dying in Gaza. So be empowered to understand that the images you share, the social media impact, the mobilization, the cities that you take, the visit to congressmen, the visit to every arena that you are making a difference, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, a picture is worth 1 billion words, and that is the tipping point that we're witnessing in front of our eyes. We see it, and we are completely aware of what is taking place. Now let me shift a little bit to say what we need to do on a couple of fronts. We have all been mobilized to offer humanitarian relief, and that is very important. But I want for us to understand that we have to actually invest strategically in helping both Gaza and Palestine, both in the US and across the world. What do I mean? You know that all of the medical infrastructure in Gaza has been decimated. We know today, even in the West Bank, that some of the medical establishments also have been attacked. Second, we know that all of the universities and the schools have been completely either wiped out or completely damaged. So we need to be very creative on how to respond to this crisis in our humanitarian engagement, but more strategically, how to build a nation where the land where people are standing is subject to a genocide. And that requires our creativity of mind, spirit, and resources. In this sense, I want to encourage those students in here and those who have any engagement with academic institutions to go back and create and make sure that universities have a Palestine Studies program. You need to have a Palestine Studies program that is able to document what is taking place, and then on the next step, begin to actually encourage the universities to engage in rebuilding Palestine, because it's not only us Palestinians or us Muslims and us Arabs is important, but we have to marshal the resources of all of the societies here and across the world to rebuild Gaza. Those who were complicit have to pay for their complicity by providing the resources and the infrastructure to build for Palestine. But it's you who have to bring the pressure to bear. And don't allow anyone to tell you to be polite in asking for what is just and what needs to be done in rebuilding Gaza. So Palestine Studies programs are very critical for us, because if you don't write your history, the Orientalists will write it. If you don't write your history, the Zionists will write it. If you don't write your history, all the hypocrites will write it. And if you don't write your history, study it and document it, then it actually will be erased from history. So that's very important. Added to this is the following. I want us to begin to think of how to offer Palestinian students in Gaza, in Palestine, in other places, ability to matriculate in U.S. institutions. And this might be something that positively can be done at your institutions. How to do that? Many institutions are attempting to find a way for them to actually engage and support without appearing to be critical of Israel. We'll take them at their word, right? Sometimes, diversity, equity, and inclusion might be an avenue, even though it's under assault today. Take them for their word. If you want to have an engagement with Palestine proactively, positively, then offer scholarships for Palestinians who are in the refugee camps, who are in Egypt, who are already being displaced. Offer them a way to enroll in your universities, and using what you call Zoom or meeting place and so on for them to matriculate, which requires for us to do specific work at the university, at the state level, at the national level, for us to actually make that possible. Because if we look, all of the universities have been demolished, which means a generation will be actually without an education, and that itself is an aspect of genocide. If you look at the Convention of Genocide, denying and making impossible for people to be educated about their culture, their history, their tradition, and being able to fully articulate themselves as a human being, then that is actually part of genocide. So undoing genocide requires for us to actually think on those different ways, for us to pressure the universities, especially those who might be sympathetic. I'm not saying they are, but those who are appearing to be sympathetic, for us to do so. Lastly, I want you, when you go out today from this whole AMP table is on your left. We want you to continue to engage with AMP, American Muslims for Palestine. One individual is not going to change history. I know that many of us, mashallah, we're waiting for Salah ad-Din. Salah ad-Din is going to come and find you actually drinking latte at Starbucks. The person you're waiting for is here. You need to actually be engaged. So I want you to go out and engage with American Muslims for Palestine. If you don't have a chapter in your neighborhood or your city or your state, we want you to engage with AMP to open a chapter. And we'll provide the resources. We'll come and provide the training for us to do so. It's collective effort that makes change and makes history possible. So we want you to engage with us and make sure that you actually engage with AMP. It's outside to your left. The AMP booth is outside, and collectively we would make history. I want you to be confident that Palestine will be free. And Palestine, the freedom of Palestine is a mental state. I believe that Palestine is free, that we need to go out and actualize it on the ground. Be the person that goes out and actualize it day in and day out. Your commitment to the Palestine struggle to freedom begins here and begins in every day of your life. Take the time to do it. Free Palestine, Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Assalamu alaikum.